Morning, church. Good to see you this morning. We are so glad that you're here. So glad that you have come to be a part of our services this morning. Those that didn't get a little survey, if I missed you, those that came in late, there's a little survey that I have for me with regards to some things that I might preach or teach in Bible class next year. And so I always have the opportunity to say no or can't do it or whatever. But if you'll see me after services, I've got plenty more in the back, and I'll be sure and get you on because I'd like your input as well. But we're glad to see you this morning. Hope that you had a good day. Hope you had a good weekend. If I call for sputter in the middle of this, we carried Graceland and Kara and Ethan were here. They had to go back. She teaches a small children's class this quarter in Bible school, and so they had to go back last night. But we went to one of these pumpkin farms and had a great time, but I must have swallowed a lot of dust. And so if I sputter, don't think anything about it. Just yeah, okay. And but I'm sputtering a little bit this morning. So we're glad though that you're here as we study a portion of God's Word. There was a lady that was very precious in congregation. Her name was Miss Bartlett. Miss Bartlett was loved by everyone. And one day, a mother was talking to her two small children about being sure to speak to Miss Bartlett when they came to church. So as she was talking to them about it, the little boy said, "I don't know who Miss Bartlett is." And the little girl, who was about 3 years older than the little boy, looked at him and says, "Yes, you do." And he said, "No, I don't." And she said, "Yes, you do. She's the woman that smells real good when you walk past." He said, "I know Miss Bartlett." And the reality of it is we all leave something behind. As we travel through life, we leave behind influences, we leave behind examples, we leave behind teaching, we leave behind a lot of things. And that's important. As we grow older in life, or excuse me, maybe I should say, as I grow older in life, one of the great things that I tend to think about is my legacy. What is my legacy? The word legacy literally means what you leave behind. That's your legacy. Now, admittedly, we often think of legacy as folks that are rich, folks that have a lot of money, folks that can leave their children with a lot of cash on hand or a lot of money, say, invested in something, a portfolio that's huge, that has a lot of zeros at the end of it. We think of a legacy as someone that is able to leave something from the standpoint of their name is on a building somewhere, or it's a foundation and their name is on it, or something to that magnitude. That's often what we think of with regards to legacy. Or if they can leave a big collection of something and they leave it to somebody. I was talking to Ethan, my son, yesterday, and I was talking about what will probably happen to my library as the years pass on. And here's what he said. Of course, Ethan, I don't know if you know, Ethan works for Freed Hardeman, and he's a business analyst for Freed Hardeman. But anyway, Ethan said, "Please don't leave your books to Freed Hardeman unless you have a very rare, very expensive book." And I said, "Well, I'm not planning on it." He said, "Well, good, because we have people the preachers leave their libraries to us all the time, and we're just running over." And I said, "I understand." But we think, that's our legacy. And in many ways, for us preachers, that's maybe it. But it's what you leave behind. You don't have to have a big portfolio. You don't have to have the big, if you will where everyone is interested in it being read. Although it's important to have a will. You don't have to have a building with your name on it. You don't have to have the collection that you leave behind to some group or some people. You don't have to have your name on some foundation to have a good legacy. To leave behind, to have a good legacy is important because ultimately what we're doing with the legacy is whatever we have and whatever we are, that's what we're passing on. Whatever we are and whatever we have and whatever we could have told, our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren and our neighbors and our friends for that matter, whatever we could tell them. That's our legacy. That's what we're leaving behind. Invariably, what we remember in life, stories. John Rose wrote a book, 7 Things That Your Children Will Remember. And one chapter in it is they'll remember the stories that you told and the events that you went to together. And I think he's so right in his affirmation there in that chapter. That's what we remember. We remember people and places, and we remember events. We remember those things. What we leave behind is important. What we leave behind is valuable. And so we ask the question as we pass the torch on, as we grow older, and ultimately, as we know, either the Lord's going to come again or we're going to die. What we pass on, or should we say it this way, what is our byline after our name is said becomes our legacy. Now, byline, I mean this. When they say like, well, Paul Daugherty, he was or he did, or he thought, that becomes my legacy. That becomes your legacy. And so imagine, if you will, for just a few minutes, and I know it's hard and we don't really like to think about this, but imagine, if you will, for just a second, at your funeral, and people are passing by your casket, and they're saying, she was, or he was. What are they saying about you? What is the legacy that you're leaving behind? This morning, while there's many different ways of looking at this, and I have thought about this sermon for many months now, to be honest, because I've been thinking about my own legacy. There's many different ways of going at this, and I've chosen this way today, and there may be another one in a couple of weeks that's somewhat similar, and then there may be some in the future that hit upon this point as well. Because I think this is important. I think it's important for all of us to think about what we're leaving behind for others. This morning, I want us to think about living our life in such a way that our life itself is a legacy. Well, how do we do that? First of all, by living our values. And we add the word every day because to me that's love. What are our values? I think by being here this morning, you've ultimately shown what your values really are. Your values are what God has said in his word. Values, the idea of values is the ideas, the principles, the philosophies of life, the philosophy, maybe we should say singular, of life. It is that which you cherish and that which you ultimately live by. Jesus said it so simply in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 16. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. We get that, don't we? We understand that. We understand that what Jesus is saying is live your life. Live it the way you're supposed to. Live it the way you should. Live it as a reflection of Jesus Christ. That becomes your values. Those are your values, and those should be the things that you live by. Those should be the things that you do. For whatever you do, whatever you eat or drink, whatever you do all to the glory of God. All wrote in 1 Corinthians 10, verse 31. That's our life. You see, so many times we often think of our life as a little bit different. We think of it more along the lines of the rich young ruler, don't we? You remember the story of the rich young ruler? I know you do. Matthew 19, here's a rich young man called a ruler. He comes to Jesus and he wants to know what he must do to inherit eternal life. Kind of interesting. He approaches Jesus with the idea of good teacher, good master. And Jesus says, why do you call me good? There's but one, that's God. But then he tells the rich young ruler, says, you want to enter into life? He says, keep the commandments. Steal, don't kill, don't commit adultery. Honor your father and mother. Keep the commandments. And this young man said, well, all these things have I kept from my youth up. What lack I yet? Or what am I lacking? Go and sell what you have and give to the poor. Now, his problem was he was able to do, as we talked about in Bible class this morning, he was able to do muscle memory, but he wasn't able to do from the heart what he needed to do. In other words, he was able to do the things that were all right with him, the things that they didn't really affect him at all. But when it came to really giving himself over to the idea of following the Lord, that's not what he wanted to do. So he went away sorrowful. As Christians, we understand the importance of living our life the way God would have us live it. To live according to these principles, to practice what we preach, might be another way of saying it. You see, by you coming to church this morning on Sunday morning, and those that will be back on Sunday night, and those on Wednesday night, we have preached a sermon. And that sermon is that while there are many other places that we could be, and there are many other things that we could be doing, we think following the Lord and loving the Lord and expressing appreciation and thanksgiving to Him for what He's done for us, especially, say, this past week, that's important. You've lived your value, yea, this very moment. You've preached your sermon, and you're living your sermon that you preached. In Acts chapter 4, verse 13, when Peter and John went into the temple, first of all, they healed the man, remember, that was lame there. But as they walked in, they noticed that something, as they began to preach and teach, was different about them. And then it dawned on them in Acts 4, verse 13, that they'd been with Jesus. And the influence and the impact of Jesus had worn off on Peter and John so much to the fact that these, as Luke says, these untrained, uneducated men came up with this idea. They had been with Jesus. We too, as Christians, have been with Jesus. But it's not just a matter of, as the rich young ruler found out, well, let's do a few things. Let's come to church. Let's sing a few songs. Let's offer up a prayer. That's good enough. No, live your life. Live your life based on the convictions that you have. Show, as Paul wrote in Romans 16 and verse 19, show yourself a pattern of good works. Be the individual that preaches the sermon. That preaches the sermon not on Sunday morning before congregation, but be the individual that preaches the sermon on Monday at work, Tuesday at the doctor's office, and Wednesday while traveling through traffic, and Thursday while talking to your neighbor, and on Friday while sitting and waiting on someone that you've helped. Preach your sermon. Live your values. Live your life by showing yourself a pattern of good works. You see, James reminds us in James chapter 1 and verse 25. He says that whoever looks into the perfect law of liberty and continues in it, same as a doer of the word. That's what we want to be. Doer of the word. Did you hear the story about the young man that went through the cemetery and he was reading the headstones and he found one that had this poem etched on it? He says, "Dear friends, as you pass by, as you are now, so once was I. As I am now, so soon you will be. So prepare to die and follow me." And underneath it, this young man wrote, "To follow you, I'm not content until I know which way you went." Get the idea. We want to know, but we want to see that life lived. We want to see that example shown. Live your values and live them every day. But secondly, invest in relationships. How do we really leave a great legacy? Invest in people. You may invest in a lot of things. You may invest in the stock market. You may invest in real estate. You may invest in gold. You may invest in silver. Invest in a lot of other things, and all that's fine. I don't have a problem with any of that. But your best investment is to invest in people. To invest in folks that you know and love. This, first of all, includes your family. Your brothers, your sisters, your mama, your daddy. It also includes your cousins, which I sadly, don't see. But invest not only in your family, but invest in your friends. And we have work friends. We have friends that maybe are not our work friends. There are friends that we would go out and eat a meal with, or go to their house and play rook, or them come to our house and play something, or just sit around and talk. Invest in your friends and your neighbors, those folks that are around you. Back quite a few years ago, I was sitting in an elders and deacons meeting, and our elder that was heading up the meeting at the time, this has been years ago, he asked, "Who knows your neighbor?" And he said, and he defined neighbor as those that lived around you. I raised my hand. He said, "Well, yeah, you would." I don't know what he meant by that, but nobody else raised their hand. And I thought, you folks don't live out in the sticks. Y'all got people around you, and you don't know your neighbors. You haven't talked to your neighbor? Yes, I have. There's Miss Virginia back there. She's one of them. I talked to others. Talked to mine across the street here a week or two ago. Talk to your neighbor. I talk to Steve every once in a while. He's my neighbor. I talk to my neighbors. Relationships are important. Why? Because people are important. And it's not just the people, but it's the idea of their soul. That's important too. But to leave a lasting legacy, we need to let people know that we love them and we care about them, that we're interested in them, that we're folks that live the life that we're supposed to live, that we're the example that we're supposed to be. Does that include your church family? Well, sure. Paul says that we're a family. He says that if I tarry long in writing, he says that you may know how to behave yourself in the household. Several versions use the word household in 1 Timothy 3, verse 15, the word household. He also uses it in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 19. He uses the same word. What's he talking about? He's talking about family. The word household literally means family. Church is a family. Why do we have so many fellowship meals? Is it because we like to eat? Well, yeah, that's right there up on the list. But it's also because we want to spend time with each other. We want to invest in each other. Because ultimately what we're trying to do is encourage one another. We're trying to lift up the hands that hang. We're trying to strengthen the weak knees. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 12. We're trying to build up one another. We're trying to encourage one another. We're trying to help one another. After all, John kind of summarizes it in First John, chapter 4, verse 21. He says, if you're going to love God, he said, you got to love one another. Woo-hoo. Now, was John talking about the church? I think so. But could he extend to others? I think so as well. You see, if we're going to leave a lasting legacy, people have to remember who we are. And they remember who we are by what we do for them. Have you ever gone through the Bible and just tried to find the examples of kindness? You've thought about Mordecai in the book of Esther, chapter 2, recently? Probably not. Mordecai in chapter 2, the book of Esther, in verse 7, took what would amount to, it says now, I meant to ask Suzanne because she's wonderful on these family things, but it says that it was his uncle's daughter. That would make it his cousin, I think. Shake your head if that's right. She's saying, I don't know what you're talking about. But they're kinfolk. He takes her in. An act of kindness. I think about in 2 Samuel, the 9th chapter. Do you remember the story of David? Let's simplify it. We remember the story of a couple of things about David, but let's simplify the story of David. David went to see his brothers, sent by his father to carry victuals. The old King James calls it victuals, carry food to his brothers. He goes there. The giant Goliath, remember, he kills him. We remember that story. Do you remember what happens after in 1 Samuel? He's hunted by by Saul, David is hunted by Saul. Saul wants to kill him. Why? Well, there's several theories and ideas. I think it was jealousy or envy. It was the idea that he wanted to kill him. But I also think that if you read in 1 Samuel, you'll find out that Saul was Probably there were some mental issues there that were going on as well. Saul wanted to kill David, and he hunted him. And David had done nothing wrong. And David, even when he had the opportunity to kill Saul, didn't kill Saul. Well, we keep reading, and Saul dies. David, while he had been anointed king long before David is now takes over the throne as king. And you get to 2 Samuel chapter 9. It's an interesting case study because you know what David is doing? He's seeking out anybody in Saul's family that he might be good to them. And they find one, and it's a man by the name of Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth was Jonathan's son. Mephibosheth was lame, and yet David promised him that you'll never have to worry about anything. Don't worry about food. Don't worry about a place to stay. You don't have to worry about anything. I'm going to take care of you. And he did. For you, David's legacy may be about the giant. For me, David's legacy is about kindness to somebody that really had a need. Well, we could go on. We could talk about Onesiphorus in 2 Timothy chapter 1, where Paul says that the Lord may have mercy upon the house of Onesiphorus, for he oft refreshed me. Don't stop there. Keep reading. For he was not ashamed of my chains. He found Paul in prison and brought Paul the things, the supplies that he needed. The government didn't supply the things that the prisoners needed. The outside world had to. And Mephibosheth brought him there, brought those things there. But Mephibosheth also refreshed or revived his spirit, encouraged Paul. An act of kindness. That's all we know about Onesiphorus. But it's enough to say what a great legacy he had. Well, on and on you could go. You could talk about Epaphras and the things that he did for the church of Colossae and for Paul as well. You could go on and talk about others, but you get the idea. Invest in people. That's how you leave a great legacy. But thirdly, you leave a great legacy by giving back. Giving back. We all can say that we've been blessed. And not only blessed, but we can also say that in many ways we are indebted to others. And we are indebted to God for the great blessings that he gives us. We are indebted not just to God, but we also are indebted to the world for what we have. I'm indebted to you. First of all, you took me in March of 2020. You turned COVID on everybody, but no. But you took me in. You said, yeah, we want him to be our preacher. And then you just didn't take me in, but you took me in as family. I'm indebted to you for that. I'm indebted to you for what you supply Suze and I from the standpoint of financial substance. You take care of our needs from a physical standpoint, the house that's provided, and the things that you provide, but the love and the care. We're all indebted. We're indebted to everyone and to all those that we come in contact with. And sometimes we sit not as givers, but as takers. What can I take from you? You owe me. I deserve this. And what are you going to give me? What am I going to get out of this? Jesus Christ, though, came to this world, as he himself said, not to be served, but to serve. And to give his life as a ransom for many. You want to leave a great legacy? Give back to people. Well, preacher, I'm still not going to have my name on that building. No, you're not. It's all right. They're still not going to name a foundation after me. Probably not. And they won't even have a scholarship somewhere in my name. No, probably not. What are you giving back to people? What are you giving back to this world? What are you giving back to God? See, Paul said in Philippians chapter 2, he says, don't look on your own things, but look also on the things of others. Verse 3. Be concerned not just about yourself, but about others. He wrote in Romans chapter 12, he'll talk about distributing to the necessity of the saints in verse 13. Talk about giving to those that you love from a church family standpoint. Giving to those that have a need. How do you have a great legacy? You give back. It's not about taking. It's about giving. Jesus reminds us of this. Jesus reminds us, he says, that if we'll give, bushel, if you will, packed down, running over, you know what it says? It says God will give you back. He'll give you back abundantly. He'll give you back more than you put in. You put it in, God's going to give you more back. We have a hard time seeing that principle at times because we often do measure life from a physical, oftentimes monetary standpoint. But it's not what you can take. It's what you can give. It's not, if you will, what can they put on my plate? But it's what can I give to others? I read a story back some time ago. It was a fascinating story of a father that was trying to train his child to be a good servant. And the thing that he did every day when his child came home from school, he didn't ask him, well, how much homework do you have? Or do you have any homework? How late are we going to be up tonight because of that homework? He didn't ask him anything about his homework. He'd ask him, did you have a good day? Yes. But his first question was this: who did you help today? That's the idea of service. Who did you help today? Who did you give? See that we owe no man nothing but to love one another, Paul would write in Romans 13, beginning in verse 9 and verse 10. You see, he would remind us, just as the Hebrew writer reminded us in Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 16, but to do good and to share with such sacrifices, God is well pleased. And so we're reminded of the idea and the teaching that if you want to live a good legacy, give back. Give back to the world. Give back to others. Give back, of course, to God. For we've been blessed. But then fourthly, you want to leave a great legacy? Share your knowledge. You know, we're all, in some ways, we're all vacuum cleaners. You might say, no, I don't run the vacuum cleaner. We're all sponges then. If you don't want to be a vacuum cleaner, you're a sponge. What do you mean, preacher? It's simply this. What you read, what you see, you're taking in, and you're applying to your knowledge. How many of us know righty-tighty, lefty-loosey? Probably all of us. Where'd we get it? Mom and Daddy? Yeah. Oh, if you didn't, okay, I gave it to you. You're welcome. But we all understand the principle. How important our fathers are to us. Do you know in 2 Kings, the 17th chapter, the very last verse, that it talked about folks still had statues and idols as their fathers, and they continued to practice that even as their fathers. Hundreds of years later, they were still practicing idolatry. Why? Because of their fathers. We learn a tremendous amount of things. We learn both the spiritual and physical. We're blessed with the spiritual because we come to church, because we study our Bible, and we want to share that knowledge with others, whether it be a somebody living down the street, somebody we know and talk to occasionally, whether it be a family member, whoever it may be. And we might share with them the knowledge of, hey, have you read this scripture? Do you read your Power for the Day? Started in October. You ever thought about reading? Maybe as you read, you find one devotional that has a good verse in it that's something about a friend, and then you call your friend and say, hey, guess what I read today? You tell them about it. Have you shared the knowledge from the physical world of how to do things, how to reason through things, how to see things as they are, how to live life, how they understand that there's two ideas. They lived happily ever after. The end is not usually the way life ends. And so we learn that there's difficulty in life. Do we share that with them? Oh, we can make a long list. There's a whole sermon right there, isn't it? Probably a series of sermons of things that we can share with our children and our neighbors and our friends and our loved ones and our fellow church members. I was reading the first of this past week in 2 Corinthians for my own edification, not for a sermon or for anything of that nature. And I was reading the book of 2 Corinthians, and I came across that wonderful passage that always there and I've always remembered, but it just sometimes it slips my mind. 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 15, Paul says that we're the fragrance of Jesus Christ. Wow. You and I, in the sight of God, are the fragrance of Jesus Christ. We're the Miss Bartlett that has the smell, remember at the beginning of the sermon? We're the Miss Bartlett to those people we come in contact with. And we need to share that knowledge. Hosea said, my people are destroyed because of lack of knowledge. It wasn't so much the knowledge as the fact that they wouldn't act upon the knowledge that they had, that they needed to quit serving idols and they needed to follow God. Share your knowledge. Share what you know. Share it with your children. Share it with your grandchildren. Share it with your spouse. Share it with your neighbor. Share it with your fellow brother and sister in Christ. Share what you know. Pass it on. Give it to somebody else. Leave a lasting legacy. So we ask a question, how do we really leave that lasting legacy? Well, we've given you some ideas, but let me give you kind of what I think is it in a nutshell. We accomplish the charge of leaving a lasting legacy by living with purpose. Heaven is our goal. That's our legacy. If we'll live our life and we'll live it with the idea of heaven is our goal. You know what Nehemiah said in Nehemiah 13? He said it a couple of times. It's interesting. He said it towards the end of the book of Nehemiah. But Nehemiah said, especially right there at the last verse of the Bible, he says, remember me, O God, for good. Now, we have to maybe look into that a little bit to understand what's he talking about. I think Nehemiah is talking about for the good that he did. God, remember me for the good that I did. For the legacy that I've left behind, for the aim that I had was the same aim that Paul had. I press towards the mark, the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. You want to leave a great legacy? I hope you do. I believe you do. You wouldn't be here even this morning if you didn't. Live your life with God, for God, and by God. And your legacy will be great. This morning, if you need to respond to his loving invitation, won't you come? While together we stand and sing.